On this episode, I'll update you on all the big things to happen for this upcoming week, such as announce this week's episodes on the Prepare Like a Pro podcast and YouTube channel, discuss our power tip that we do every week at the end of this episode to help footballers get fitter, faster, stronger, and strength and conditioning coaches to help footballers get fitter, faster, stronger. We're going to add in a new segment now that it's round one in the Australian football season, and that will be providing this week's football tips as well as a special prize. If you enter in your tips for the week before the round starts to our Instagram, email, LinkedIn, however you want to send them, and you get all tips right. So if it's 9 rounds that are played, you're going to get a free strength and conditioning program valued at $99. And I'll also throw in a free consultation or private gym program, coaching session, if for those living in Melbourne. Obviously, if you're living outside of Melbourne and that coaching session can't be face-to-face, then we'll do it on a Zoom consultation where we'll dive into your goals and discuss not only your short-term goals, medium-term, long-term, and however I can help your athlete development to allow you to be the best footballer you can be for this upcoming season. So over $200 worth of products there if you get 9 out of 9 tips. So let's have a bit of fun with it. Remember to send in your tips before the round starts to enter. So this week, round one, get the Sharon footy out. We have Melbourne versus Doggies. I tipped Melbourne, went to that game. Lucky enough to work with the Melbourne Football Club and, of course, tipped Melbourne. They had a great performance. Carlton Richmond, we had our VFL game on. I didn't watch that one, but I tipped the Tigers and got that one wrong. St Kilda Pies, a lot of my mates go for St Kilda and go for Collingwood Football Club. So I went to that game and tipped the Pies and they won. Geelong Essendon, my original team that I go for, the Bombers, were pretty disappointing. They got smashed by the Cats. However, I did tip the Cats. I think they're going to have a strong start to the season. They've seem to have a point to prove. GWS and Sydney Swans, I tipped my cousin's team, Hayden McLean, to kick a couple of goals, which is always great to see. And the Swans got up. Lions versus Port Adelaide, I tipped Lions there, home game, and they had a strong finish to come out on top there. My old footy club, Hawthorn Football Club and North Melbourne Hawks, the young team had a great performance and beat North, so great start to the season to the boys. Well done. Adelaide versus Fremantle and Eagles versus Suns, those two games are actually going on right now. So I've tipped the Fremantle Dockers to get an away win against Adelaide and then West Coast to beat the Suns for a home game. So we'll see how that pans out. But so far, I'm tracking for Melbourne, Pies, Geelong, Swans, Lions, Hawthorn. So I've got 6 out of the potential 7. So we'll see how we round off. For round 2, so if you want to get involved and see how you stack up against my votes, we've got Doggies versus Carlton. I'm tipping Doggies to bounce back and get back on the winning table for that one. We've got Swans versus Geelong. I think Swans will get up as a home game for that one. So I've tipped Sydney Swans. Tipped Geelong. As I mentioned earlier, I think they're going to have a strong start to the season. So I'm going away for the Geelong Cats to get a win at Sydney. Collingwood versus Crows. I reckon Collingwood will continue their momentum for a strong start. Crows, obviously the youngest team in the league, have it up against themselves this year. But as long as they show some promise, I'm sure everyone will be happy. Essendon versus Lions. I'm tipping Bombers to bounce back, but I'm a bit hesitant. But I'm going to tip the Bombers on that one against the Lions. Port versus Hawks. I think the Ports will be too strong a home game. Suns versus D's. Obviously, Melbourne will get up on that one. And North Melbourne versus Eagles. I think North will bounce back and get a win, their home game. The Eagles are obviously a bit iffy pre-season, so it'll be interesting to see how that game pans out. Richmond versus GWS, I reckon Tigers will bounce back and beat GWS, but I reckon that'll be a tough one. Dockers versus Saints. Saints didn't look very good up live against Pies, so I'm going to tip the Dockers for that one, especially home game. I reckon they'll get through. So like I mentioned, if you got nothing to lose, send through your tips through a direct message, email if you want, jack@preparelikeapro.com. For this year, we're going to do this every week. And like I mentioned, if you win, you get a free month on our online high-performance program valued at $99. and a coaching session with myself valued at $120. So over $200 worth of value there for free. All you need to do is send in your tips. We'll do one winner each week, and I'll announce that on this week's podcast. For our upcoming live show, we have Dale Griffith, which we did that live interview a couple of weeks ago. He is the founder and CEO of Coda Nutrition. He's also an author and a firefighter. So really interesting chat around dehydration, the negative effects of it for footballers, what you should be doing to fueling your performance as well. So if you're interested in upping your game, particularly now that we're in season, either you're playing practice matches or round one is around the corner. So all those things that you do away from the club, like staying hydrated and making sure you're well fueled with your nutrition, but also like Daryl talked about, it doesn't just stop there. You've got to maintain that as best as you can throughout the game to not only prevent the negative effects of dehydration, but also to allow yourself to recover better going into the next week. So really informative chat. Recommend listening into it. That will be released on our podcast on Tuesday. Wednesday, our Get Better plan will be on why body awareness is key to preventing overload type injuries. So if you've had a few soft tissue injuries or tendinopathies, definitely tune in for our Wednesday's Get Better plan. Not only do we help you develop your body awareness, but also how to detect pain and what the difference is between good and bad pain. Thursday, we have a live episode with Daniel Cherney, the sports journalist for Code. So really looking forward to him. We caught up with him for a coffee a few months ago through mutual connections. And great fella, and looking forward to having our first sports journalist sharing his journey. It's a competitive field like strength and conditioning or being a high-performance athlete. So no doubt we'll get some takeaways there. And looking forward to sharing his story and how he's got to where he's got to at the highest level for a sports journo. We have our episode bite-sized interview from the Australian leading high-performance facilities with Lachlan Wilmot, the co-founder of Athletes Authority, discussing the difference between private sector and elite sport. So that will be released on Friday. Make sure to tune in there and listen into Lachlan's presentation. Our power tip this week is going to be how coaches can make the most of warm-up. So stay to the end of the episode to listen to that one. I'm now going to tune into Instagram to answer this week's questions. G'day Instagram world, and thank you for tuning into Prepare Like a Pro Live Chat Sunday show, where I answer all your questions for the week, whether you've sent them in via email, you tune in live to this segment and send in your questions, or you might have sent them in through any of our socials through direct message. So I'm going to get into the first question, which is from Caitlin. Is it better to football train after or before gym? Great question, Caitlin, and there's definitely some different philosophies in this, but typically for Australian rules footballers for the majority of the year, we'll do our lower body strength work, which is what I think that you're referring to, after our work on the field, mainly because of priority. So we want to prioritize the football, the tactical, technical side of things over the physical side of things. So what we know from a physical development point of view is the change of direction work and the high intensity efforts on the field far outweigh the demands on the body in the gym. So from a risk to benefit ratio, from a performance point of view, the tactical side of things, so making sure that we're cognitively fresh, as well as from a technical point of view, so our ability to execute skills. We want to do those things first, and then that way we can adjust the gym program for the individual, depending on how hard they went in that field session, what the GPS is showing. If you don't have GPS, then simply having a chat with the athlete. And for the athletes listening in that don't have a strength and conditioning coach, by doing your field session first, you're adjusting the gym to suit the field. So that way you're using your tickets, let's say your fresh tickets, on the field stuff, which is the most important. Then you do your conditioning, and then we do our gym. It's not to say the strength and power work and the work that we do in the weights room isn't important. It's just saying that the field stuff is more important, but also the field stuff has a higher risk if we do that under fatigue. So that's why typically you'll see most programs at AFL at least doing their field sessions first, and then they finish with their lower body strength. But doesn't mean you can't do certain exercises like power work, activation sessions, so like mini band work, plyometric work, med ball explosive work through the upper body, and plyometric, so lower body jumps before the session to help prime you for the field session. But we wouldn't be doing typically your heavy deadlifts or heavy squats or things of that nature before football. So good question, Caitlin. Hopefully that helped. Harry, top 5 physical attributes for an inside midfielder. Great question, Harry. I would say developing your aerobic capacity, so your ability to be able to handle high volumes of running. Midfielders can typically cover anywhere between 10 and up to 14 Ks of total distance. But also you want to be able to do repeat high intensity efforts. So being able to be recovered enough to be able to produce force quickly. So thinking like your first 3 steps, how well you can do that not only in the first quarter, but also the fourth quarter. So that's where repeat speed sessions are really, really important. So aerobic capacity, repeat speed, change of direction ability. So making sure you're mobile through the hips and the ankle so you can have fluid change of direction ability, and also your technique is sound to change direction laterally. That would be the third. Some good body armor around the ribs because there's a lot of collision and a lot of contact in the stoppages, a lot of heavy contacts with your ground ball gets, hard ball gets. So making sure you've got good body armor around the trunks. That's where the gym program can be really helpful. That would be the fourth. And then fifth, I would say your ability to fend off, so your core, trunk, and upper body strength. So that ability to fend off, the old Dustin Martin fend off, would be my fifth one. But great question, Harry. Hopefully those top 5 physical attributes are helpful for you, and interested to know your feedback too, mate. Let me know what you think the top 5 are. Chloe has written in our next question: how often should you do speed and agility training for football? This will very much depend on where you are in season, off season, and pre-season, Chloe. But typically in season, which is where most footballers are at the moment, VFLW, AFLW, and the AFL and VFL men's program are all in season. So we'll go with that. So I would say for our speed work, we do speed exposure typically once a week, and that's in training, and then you'll get another hit in games. So typically you just get exposure to max velocities and a little bit of top-up speed distance, sprint distance, if you didn't get a lot from the game prior. And then we keep that topped up just to keep up your chronic exposure, which is just your 4 weekly average intact, and then some high velocity exposure as well, just to keep the body primed for this week's game. So we'll do that on your main training session, because what we do know when we look at GPS data is typically footballers won't open up too much in football drills. So that's where the strength and conditioning work. So after a warm-up or somewhere throughout the middle of the session, you just do some sprints through mainly only 3 efforts at high intensity. So we get exposure to that during the week before the game. And then typically in a game, most footballers will get between 90 and 95% exposure as well. So you get another hit there in the game. So that's 2 hits in season. Agility, you should be doing agility 3 times a week. So every football session. So your 2 training sessions, and then on game day. So that's reactive change of direction work. So basically football. And then from a change of direction technique point of view, I usually will do my linear acceleration work on the Thursday, and then alternate that with lateral change of direction work every fortnight. So linear acceleration and top speed work, and then the next Thursday I'll do change of direction technique. So every fortnight we do it from a technique point of view. Great question, Chloe. Hopefully that helped, and let me know if you have any questions or queries. Sean has written in our last question, and if you're listening in live, feel free to send in any questions, and I'll do my best to answer in your questions. We've got Sean for our last question is written: what are some of the best methods to preventing hamstring injuries? What we know with hamstring injuries is as we age, you're at higher risk. You can't prevent aging, of course. Then the other likelihood of injury is having a history of hamstring injuries. So we want to try and prevent hamstring injuries as best we can. So I love the fact, Sean, that you're asking questions around how to prevent, because you are at higher risk as you age, and you're also at higher risk as once you've had a hamstring injury. So we want to try and prevent them as best we can. Eccentric strength training, the research is strong on this. That's why the Nordic hamstring exercise is very popular. If you don't know what that is, just search it. Hamstring injury prevention playlist on our YouTube channel. We've got the Nordic exercise demonstration on there, both Nordic and weighted Nordics. Really good way to isolate the eccentric portion of basically lengthening our hamstrings under load. Lengthening is strengthening for our hamstrings. We want to make sure that we've got good range of motion through there, and they can handle high force on range as well. Regular exposure to sprinting. So like I mentioned with Chloe's questions before, so making sure we're getting that regular exposure to sprinting. So at least every week you're getting exposure to above 90% of max velocity, and even above 95% you'll get different activation of the hamstrings, I should say, at different velocities. So 95% is really, really important. We're getting regular exposure to that. And sound running technique as well. It's really hard to prove the kinematics side of things is a factor, but I generally personally believe if you're running efficiently and you're running well and you're loading the body as optimally as possible and you're focusing on that, then you're definitely doing yourself a service in terms of looking after your future self from a hamstring prevention point of view. So making sure you're doing some run drills, some run technique, and you're doing them with the intention to move more efficiently every week when you're doing your warm-ups at a football club is really, really important for preventing hamstring strains. So that would be the big ones. Obviously, the fitter you are as well, because under fatigue, you're cognitively not going to be moving, thinking as well. So you're more likely to put yourself in a vulnerable position or not move as well. So making sure you're as fit as you can be every season, and you're recovering well going into the next game or the next main session as well. So your sleep, your nutrition, hydration, and you're managing stress. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but they would be the big ones. So hopefully that helps, Sean. In terms of our power tip for this week and why warm-ups are so important, I just want to tell a quick story. I recently had a conversation with one of our interns, and then I wanted to ask our senior footballers, what are your top 3 focus areas for an in-season warm-up? And the intern mentioned injury prevention, so learning things like landing technique, running mechanics, so developing your acceleration, your sprinting and change direction mechanics, and then mobility. The footballer talked about stretch, having fun, and plenty of touches of the football. No one's wrong or right in this one. So there's a lot of things that you can do in warm-up, but I thought that would be a good opportunity this week for me to go into a bit more detail on why warm-ups are so important. So sorry, those are listening into Instagram. I'm now going over back to YouTube now, but you can feel free to hang around and listen into the rest of the podcast. So why warm-ups need to be intentional, engaging, and effective. And these are some of the key areas that I focus on, and it's almost some rules that I stick to when I'm planning my warm-ups. And that's the first one. I want to make sure warm-ups are intentional, they're planned, but also you're able to read the cues and understand the state of the group and what they need best to prepare themselves for the upcoming football session, which is probably the most important thing. The warm-up needs to take into account what is the session for that day. Is it our main football session? Is it more our craft, fundamental recovery session? So understanding what's ahead for the athlete so you can prepare the group for that. We want to make sure that we're also having some fun and that the athletes are enjoying themselves, they're engaged. So some tips and tricks around that is including games like touch rugby, soccer, dodgeball, these reactive competitive games that are different to football. Because football is a long competitive season and the pre-season's long as well, we want to make sure we're not just doing the same stuff all the time, like warm-up being your old school couple laps around the oval and some stationary kicks. We want to keep it interesting, we want to keep it fresh, and make sure that the players are engaged, and surprising them every so often can be a good thing. Involve the coaches. So from a tactical, technical point of view, there might be some drills that from the game that's played they want to add into that's going to help the performance of that session ahead. So that's where you can get the skills coach involved, particularly for kicking and craft work. So you might do 10 minutes with yourself, then back over the coach for 5 minutes, and then they finish with you for some high intensity speed work or change of direction work. I found that works really well. So then the athletes are getting a different voice throughout the warm up, and so fun. Make sure you've planned and you're understanding where we're in with the week. Are we focusing on recovery? Are we focusing on intensity? And then the third one is, like I mentioned before, movement quality. So it's a great opportunity as a coach to actually improve their speed, their fitness, their strength by improving how well they move. So change of direction, acceleration, sprinting mechanics, and jump and landing are the big rocks from a movement competency point of view. And there's no doubt that in a warm-up you can have some intentional drills in there to improve the group and give the athletes feedback if they're not moving as well on how they can improve their movement competency. So if you're getting 2 warm-up sessions, or the strength of you guys listening into the podcast, if you're getting 2 warm-up sessions, the coach is giving you 15 minutes, there's 30 minutes where you can make the athletes better. So even in season, we can make some gains. So I think a perfect warm-up takes into account all those demands, the session ahead, the current state of the athlete and the group, while incorporating some athletic development technique work specific to your group. Enjoyment and involving the coaches is critical and will make for a more enjoyable warm-up. Prep for the session ahead, and from the athlete development point of view, remember jump and land, change your direction, acceleration, and max velocity exposure. Take into account where you are with your week as well. So if you just come off from a game, that's where if from a football match, the players might be a little fatigued, no doubt, on the Tuesday for the first session. So that's where we want to make sure that if you are doing some games, they're not going to open up too much. So with your touch rugby, and soccer and dodgeball, make sure the dimensions of the game are small, so they're not going to get huge exposure to sprinting. So making sure you're thinking about it as well. You're not just playing like cat and mouse and you expose them to high intensity and they're not warmed up enough, or they're fatigued going into that. You do a hamstring. There's nothing worse. So make sure that you are incorporating these factors in with your warm up to ensure that you're getting what you want out of it while lowering the risk. Okay, so going into our final bit of the podcast, we've got our update from a program point of view. So our rack pulls are moving into a power shrug. So the athletes were focusing on a bit more power now that we're in season and taking down our strength volumes. We're going to go from 2 lower body strength sessions down to a 1 lower body strength early in the week, and then a total body strength for our second lower body session. So that way it brings our lower body volumes down, but we want to keep the intensity high. So we're still focusing on improving our strength and our power, because ultimately we want to be our strongest, as strong as we possibly can, and most powerful come finals. So intensity is key. How heavy you're lifting that bar is really, really important. But we're going to take out the grinding. You're not trying to grind through those extra reps and maxing out. Minimal fatigue, high intensity is where we're at. For those interested in joining the program, we do have a free 14-day trial. All you need to do is just go to our website and you can sign up. It also allows you to sign up to our email list, where we send out things like blog posts, upcoming events, and every now and then I'll invite you to our weekly or monthly Zoom presentation as our Get Better plan that our athletes are on. So just head over to preparelikeapro.com for that. This week's review was from Lachlan H5. He wrote a great podcast, chats to the stars of the game. Really good to get insight in the AFL life. Thanks, Lach. Really appreciate the review, mate. And if there's any way we can help you out, like you've helped us out with a review, make sure to hit us up. And if you're a fan of the podcast and you've been listening to a while, make sure to do the same as Lach and rate us on Spotify, which is a new thing that you can do now, as well as write a review on iTunes or Google. That would go a long way in not only helping myself in preparing for the podcast and what you're liking. Obviously, Lach likes the AFL players we've had on the podcast, so getting more athletes on the podcast will be a key area that I take from that feedback. But also it helps us reach more fans like yourself, or an audience similar to yourself, footballers or strength and conditioning coaches. So really appreciate the time and the effort into that, and thank you, Locke, for sending it in. That's it for this week's episode, guys. Thank you for all the questions that sent through. If you have any questions or queries, those listening to the recording, or if you're listening in live, remember to send them in via direct message. You can send in a voice message as well on our podcast page on our website and make a appearance on the podcast, or you can just simply email us at jack@preparelikeapro.com and I'll answer those questions the following Sunday. Thanks, guys. See you on the next episode.